بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن سن بسنته واهتدى بهديه إلى يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. My dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Apologies, I do have a PowerPoint presentation, but the brother who usually does the technical stuff is not here today, so unfortunately we are unable to display it. But inshallah khair, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us. So today we're going to talk about two important events within history, which in one way also go together. And that is the history of the Mamalik, the Dawla, the dynasty of the Mamalik. And we're going to look at the Mongolian invasion as well. So if you remember, for those of you who attended the last lesson, which is about a month ago, we spoke about the Ayubid Khilafah, or the Ayubid Sultanate. Salahuddin Ayyubi. We spoke about how he managed to achieve a few things, amongst which was important was that he managed to put an end to the Fatimid rule in Egypt, and by doing so he managed to put an end to this body which was present in North Africa, which was quite foreign to North Africa. And the second thing obviously that he managed to do was to halt. He didn't put an end to, but he halted the Crusades expansion, and at that time they were expanding further and further to the extent that they had taken over Jerusalem, Baytul Maqdis, and he managed to kick them out of Baytul Maqdis and return this plot of land, this sacred land, the sanctuary of the furthest mosque back to the rule of the Muslims with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now after this, he managed to establish something called the Ayubid Dynasty, which extended in Egypt all the way down to Sudan, all the way in Al-Hijaz, including Mecca and Medina, and also Sham, which is the area of Syria and Palestine at the moment, and Jordan. Most of Lebanon, which is current day Lebanon, was still occupied by the Crusade dynasties. So there are a lot of Crusade kingdoms that were present in Tarablus, in Akka, in further north as well, Antakya and the likes. And at the same time, the remaining Khilafah still existed in Baghdad. Who were the remaining Khulafa at the time? And which dynasty? The Abbasi Khilafah, which had been going up till today, up to that time, from the year 132 after the Hijrah, and continued. Now, what happened is, as the Mamalik as a concept, what does it mean? Mamluk actually means someone who is owned, and by owned means slave. And during the time of the Muslim expansions, they relied obviously on armies that they had, but also they found there was a need to have armies which were also loyal, and these armies were started to slowly be made out of slaves who were part of the Islamic State, or also those slaves that were freed. So they came together in being there loyal to the country, to the dawla, to the state, and at the same time being trained, being educated, being given lessons not only in military leadership but also in terms of Islam. So gradually a lot of the armies, and especially in Egypt and the Sham, were relying on soldiers who were from these backgrounds. And at a time towards the year 1240 or so, in the Common Era, there was repeated attacks that are happening on Egypt. Egypt was like, if you like, the center of the Ayubid rule. And there remained the Ayubid leader who was known as Al-Malik Al-Salih, the good king, Najmuddin Ayub. And he was there trying to fight off the remainders of attacks that were coming from the Crusades. Because even though the Crusades were, they were concerned with taking the Holy Lands, but they also wanted to hit the Muslims in their different areas. So Egypt was a prime target to be attacked by the Crusaders, whether they were from France, whether they were from Italy, or the likes, or even from Spain, even from England and others. So Najmuddin al-Malik al-Salih, he continued to expand his army, making use of these types of people, these type of soldiers who would help to secure and to protect the Muslim state. And these were al-Mamalik. So these were people who were owned, and they came from a slave background, but they became part of if you like, a division, a regiment in the army, and they helped to support the state in that way. Now Najmuddin, as he carried on with his conquests and his fighting, that he was trying to push off the Crusaders from that were attacking, especially that of Louis the IX from France. There came a time in 1249 when he passed away. That's it, he just died. Now he was married to a woman who was a very clever, intelligent, beautiful woman known as Shajarat ad-Dur. Her name was the Tree of Pearls. And she was also from a Mamluk background, so she was a slave at one point, and she was taken by or purchased by Najmuddin Ayub before he became the Sultan, and he later freed her and married her, and so she was from that background, if you like, al-Mamluk. Now when he died, she was afraid that there will be chaos in the country, because he was keeping the country together, if you like. At the same time, the Crusades were attacking. So she didn't quickly mention his death, tried to keep it secret, and sent a message to his son, Turan Shah, who happened to be in Syria and Sham, to come back to take hold of the reins of the Ayubid Sultanate, as his father had passed away, trying to make things happen just gently. Now, Turan Shah came back, and when he came back, he found that this group, al-Mamalik, or these army regiments, they had certain influence in the country. They were commanders, they were leaders, and so he tried to gradually push them away. He tried to do whatever he could to, try to replace those officials with people that he had brought in. He tried to take control of different ministries and areas. Obviously, he's the new ruler now, and he wants to make sure, as was the case, unfortunately, in a lot of the countries, there was a lot of conspiracies, there's a lot of deflections, there was a lot of people who are conspiring against one another. So he was afraid of that. Also, he accused Shajarat ad-Dur, who was his stepmother, he accused her of taking all the jewels and the wealth of his father, and so he asked her to give everything back. At the same time, he wanted to distance her away, even though it was her who sent for him to come back. So you see how now he had changed against them. Now when the Mamalik, who had still control in the army, they saw that this guy was acting in the way that he was, and that he might actually be a trouble to them, they thought that the best way really was to get rid of him. And so they ended up assassinating him, this guy. So he only ruled for a few months. And he was effectively the last of the Ayubid sultans. Okay, and so with him ends the Ayubid rule of that area in general. We'll see that there are more specifics to that. Now there is a void, because there is no, even though these were Muslim countries, they still had the monarchies. People were inheriting one after the other. There's no Ayubid son to come after. So Shajarat al-Dur, who is the wife of the ruler who had died, Najmuddin, she said, and she took a very unprecedented position here as a woman. She said, I am going to be the ruler of the Ayubid Dynasty, which was basically in Egypt and the following areas. So what happened is, when she announced this and she said this, she has the support of the army, if you like, the support of the generals, the Mamalik, because they are the ones who assassinated Turan Shah. So they were behind her. But generally, people were not happy with that. They were not happy with this decision. The people in Egypt, were going through lots of protests and demonstrations. How could a woman become our ruler? The other Ayubid emirs, who, even though Ayub Shah had left his, had died, there were still emirs, like princes, in different areas of Sham. They all rejected this, especially the ones in Aleppo, Halab, and Damascus. So they ended up saying that that's it. They're no longer going to be following the rule that was central in Egypt. Even the Khalifa, the Abbasid Khalifa, who was in Baghdad, his name was Al-Musta'sim, he also rejected it, because you have to know that even though these were separate entities, they still didn't announce that none of them announced that there would be a Khalifa. They were saying, like, follow the Khalifa. They are in line with the Khalifa. They still accepted the Khalifa, if you like a picture, like a notion. He was the notion, the title for the rule. Much like the Queen today, the Queen of the UK is considered the sovereign head in different countries. Different countries, they still have the Queen's picture on their money. She doesn't rule those countries, but they are still consider her as the head of the state. It's a nominal picture. So the Abbasid Khalifa also rejected this move by Shajarat al-Dur. More so, he also mocked them. They said, he sent them a message saying, if you don't have any men, let us know. We can send you a man to rule. So you can see how it reached that kind of setback. So as a result, seeing all of this happened, Shajarat al-Dur decided to marry someone so that person, her husband, will be the new leader. Get rid of all those people who are talking about a woman not leading, and she can then rule behind the curtains, if you like. She can still kind. You can see this woman is quite an influential woman. She is the one who was trying to manage things from behind the veils. So what happened is, she married and she looked for someone who's not going to be that strong. from the Mamalik. And she chose somebody who was known as Al-Izz or Izz-Din Aybek. And she married this guy, Izz-Din Aybek, and she abdicated and passed the rule to him to try and quieten down everything. So in fact, she was only in charge of Egypt as the Sultan for 80 days. Now, when this time she wanted to see if she could carry on her, if you like, de facto rule, and she thought that Aybek wouldn't be that kind of strong person that's going to influence. But actually, he turned out to be different than what she had thought. He knew that maybe she wanted to control. So he gradually started to get more power. So you see the group of Mamalik, if you like, the division that had was following Al-Malik Al-Salih, Najmuddin, they were called As-Salihiyya. They were like a Salihiyya regiment of Mamalik. Now he wanted to set up his own regiment who would also be loyal to him. And so there starts a new regiment called Al-Mu'izziyya. Okay, because he was also known as Al-Mu'izz. So he now set up his own regiment to try and help him and to support him, and gradually to get hold of matters without causing too much of tension. But this is the nature, unfortunately, as if you like, the reality of the Mamalik rule was a lot of people were in opposition to others. There was a lot of tensions. It's a very warped mentality, unfortunately. You know, you'd have thought that Muslims, as Muslims, they would be united together. They would try to look at the common enemy. They would help each other, not fighting each other. We saw before when we spoke about Andalus how people were fighting each other in the different cities and different countries. We saw how even in the Abbasid, how they were fighting, you know, brother against brother and sometimes son against father, fighting each other. So this was also happening in the Mamalik dynasty. So much so that it led to him, this tension arise so much that this guy, Aybek, he ended up killing one of the other important leaders of the other regiment, the Salihiyya regiment, whose name was Fakhruddin Aktai. You see, these are from almost like from Turkic background. And that, as a result, meant that he would try to, it's all about cementing his rule. Now, when he did that, that also prompted further problems. Now, Shajar ad-Dur, who was very closely allied to the Salihiyya people, she saw that this was an attack on her. After all, she was the one who brought him, she put him in place, so she wasn't happy with this. This was also further cemented by the fact that Aybek, wanting to consolidate his relationships, he wanted to marry from the head of the Mosul in North Iraq, the ruler there. His name was Badruddin Lu'lu. So he wanted to marry his daughter. So now he's going to have another wife. And this also infuriated Shajar ad-Dur. So what did she plot in this regards? She said, best way is to get rid of my husband. This guy who now is going rogue, he's not allowing me to do anything. Now he's going to get married again. It's all going downhill. So as a result, what she did, she plotted against her husband, and in fact, that's what happened. She ended up sort of conspiring with his servants, and his servants ended up killing him while he was taking a bath. Now, prior to this, if you remember, when Aybek killed the other guy, a lot of the people who were from his regiment, they left Egypt. They were not happy that this was happening. They knew that this is going to be a plot against them, so they ended up leaving. So now you can already see that factions were developing with this fledgling dynasty, Al-Mamalik. Now, Shajar ad-Dur wanted to say that, well, you know, he died. This guy just died. They don't want to, you know, she don't want to own up to the fact that she had killed him. But after they, you know, they caught her. They tortured the servants. They all confessed, and as a result, she was imprisoned. But later, she was also and killed in quite a nasty way. Aybak, who had married Shajar ad-Dur, he had a wife, another wife, not this one that we mentioned in Mosul, and this wife had given birth to, or had a child called Monsoor Ali. And seeing what Shajar ad-Dur had done to her husband, because she had more than one wife, she ordered all her servants, her female servants, to go onto this Shajar ad-Dur who had killed, and they kept on hitting her with the clogs until she died, basically. So they ended up killing her for killing the ruler. So now we have Al-Mansoor Ali, and Al-Mansoor Ali is only 15-year-old. He is the, if you like, the heir to the throne, but being 15 years old, he's still not mature enough. So he is given as a guardian under another ruler who was close to in the group of the regiment of the Salihiyya, and his name was Sayfuddin Qutuz. So Sayfuddin Qutuz, he became the guardian of Al-Mansoor Ali, who is, again, in the picture, in the frame, he is the leader. But in reality, he's still a 15-year-old. He's still new. He still doesn't have experience. So Sayfuddin Qutuz was the de facto ruler of Egypt. And what he wanted to do, this guy, Qutuz, was very clever. He was very righteous as well. He knew that there was lots of issues happening that we need to bring people together. So he started to reach out to those factions that had left and had gone, trying to bring them back. There was a guy called Qalawan, there was a guy called Baybars, different people from, they wanted to bring back so that they could unite, you know, because he knew that there was going to be an attack soon. And who is that attack going to come from? It's going to come from none others than the expanding, fledgling dynasty that was rising in the east. Who was that? That's me. Who is that? It was the Mongols. The Mongols. And this is, which century are we in terms of the Corman era? We're in the 13th century. In terms of the Hijri, we are in the 7th century. So at the beginning of the 7th century, so about 600 and so after Hijrah, a guy by the name of Genghis Khan, who was someone who was initially expelled and exiled from amongst the Mongols. He was also someone who was an orphan. They didn't give him much credit for some reason, whatever, they expelled him. And he went and sort of lived in the, almost like a nomadic existence, but gradually he managed to gain strength, gain popularity with amongst his tribe, and he managed to form a strong force where he went back and attacked the existing Mongolian dynasty and overturned it and managed to take hold of the Mongolian seat. And then this guy was very fierce, very ferocious, very vile, ambitious. He was someone who wanted to expand, wanted to gain. He had on his mind to rule the earth. Okay? So he starts by attacking and trying to expand as much as possible. So where does he go? He goes towards China, and he manages very quickly to subdue the Chinese dynasty then and bring them under his rule. And the nature of the Mongolians was that they were very brutal. They were people who, many historians describe them as people whose mission is really, and it's almost like they hated humanity. You know, they just wanted to destroy. They wanted to destroy. They weren't like people who were bringing civilization. They weren't bringing a religion. They weren't bringing anything. You see, you can compare that to the message of Islam when Rab'i ibn Amir, the messenger that was sent when the Muslims went to fight the Persians. They were sent by Umar ibn al-Khattab. And Kisra, the ruler at that time, he invited the Muslims to come and address him. And they sent Rab'i ibn Amir. And Kisra said, "What has brought you? What has brought you from the desert? You know, you are Arabs, why have you come here?" So he said, "Our message is we have come with the will of Allah to take the slaves of Allah," meaning Allah's creation, the humans, away from the worship of slaves, a worship of other humans, to the worship of the Lord of the humans, and from the injustice of religions to the justice of Islam, and from the restrictness and narrowness of the dunya to the vastness of the dunya and the akhirah. It's like a message. There's a message, there's a civilization, there is a message of mercy, compassion, etc. Whereas these guys, the Mongolians, their mission was destruction, killing, brutality. And the way that they managed to succeed, and even their success, was due to this very nature of brutality. When they would conquer people, they would kill most of them, and those who they don't kill, they would take them as prisoners, and then they would force them to fight under their army, to fight the next dynasty that they attack, and so on. So they managed to take over China, and they managed to expand, and then they came into a potential conflict. Now remember, unfortunately the PowerPoint is not working. I would have showed you a map of how the Muslim countries were at that time, how the world was. We understood that there's the Abbasi Khilafah, but the Abbasi Khilafah, it was a nominal one, it still existed. It was mainly in Iraq, in Baghdad and the surrounding areas. Okay? There was a much bigger dynasty called the Khawarizmi Dynasty, which was to the east of Iraq, which is present-day Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and all the Central Asia Muslim republics, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. All these areas were under a large Muslim dynasty called the Khawarizmi state, extending all the way to India. And then you had the Salajiqa, the Seljuqs in sort of Turkey and that area. Then at the other side, Egypt and Sham, you had the Ayubids. And in North Africa, you had the Muwahhideen, and they extended into Andalus as well. So you can see that the Muslim world wasn't unified. It was very much disturbed. Now, some people say that, different historic events, but they say that Genghis started off having some sort of agreement with the Muslim neighbors, now who were the Khawarizmis. But at the same time, he wanted to expand. But he had some sort of treaty. So there was some businessmen or tradesmen who went into one of the cities in Khawarizm. And while they were there, and this is where different people will have different narrations, but the ruler of that time, that area, he thought that these people either were spies or something happened. He ended up killing those Mongolian businessmen or traders, which infuriated Genghis Khan, but at the same time gave him a reason to attack the Khawarizmi state. So the leader at that time was Muhammad ibn Khawarizm Shah, and he was based in a place called Oranga. That was his capital. And so he gradually, he became so angry, he prepared such a big army to come and fight the Muslims. Now, the Mongolians at that time, Khurasan was such big, lots of small cities, but big, important cities like Samarkand, like Bukhara, like Balkh, like Kabul, Asfahan. These were all big, fortress cities. But like the nature today, it wasn't like one big country. Everything, every city had its own garrison, its own walls, etc., etc. It's like now today, if you go to some of the old English cities, you still find the city walls. Like you go to Canterbury or York or whatever, you'll find that there's still the city walls, of the old city. Obviously, the city has expanded, and those walls now people are living outside. But there are these walls and they have gates, and it's all to protect the. So he started to go and attack that city that killed his businessman. Obviously, coming now with this kind of brutality, the people that went out, they sent an army trying to fight back. They were defeated, and now the Mongols are getting the upper hand, slowly and surely. And this guy, the leader, Muhammad ibn Khawarizm, instead of what his people were expecting him to do, was to actually at least rally his armies, to strengthen and to support. They found that he was almost, he was baffled by what was happening, that he didn't even want to resist. He started to take his army and run away to different cities, almost like retreating, to run away from the Mongolians. And the Mongolians, seeing this, that gave them more strength, more determination. Said, this guy is weak. He's not even, not even resisting. And so they go and they attack city after city. And they come to the famous city Samarkand, and they, this is just as an example, they say to the people, they surround lay siege to the city, and they invite the city to surrender. If you surrender, we will give you our word that you'll be safe, etc. And the city, sometimes people don't know, their army has gone, their people are there. There's still people who are fighting maybe, but the general sort of actual uniformed army has been gone, taken away. So after much deliberation, and maybe holding out for a little bit, the city decides to surrender on the basis that this guy has given them his word. So he said, for me to accept this, everybody needs to come. Everybody leaves the city and comes to show like their allegiance and their surrendering. And they say at that time there was around 700,000 people, inhabitants of Samarkand. They're all forced to come out. They have to surrender, and they have to accept that. And he invites everybody, asks all the businessmen to come, and to etc. So he basically tries and withdraws everybody out. And then, with one simple order, he orders everybody to be executed. In one go, 700,000 of those people, and maybe not all of them were killed, because he retained some of them as prisoners, like we said, used to use them for other attacks, but the vast majority of the inhabitants were killed. Why did they do this? We said that there are people who are bloodthirsty, but they wanted to instill fear and terror in all the other cities that they're going to come and attack. Because now the cities are going to think, oh, if we, what's going to happen? These people are coming to attack us. They're coming to. And in fact, that's what happened. City after city would be attacked, and they would just surrender, and it was a calamity among calamity. This is why historians, even people like Ibn al-Athir, one of the famous historians, he said that he waited many years thinking and deliberating on whether he should write this history or not. Yani it is such a tragic history to write down. But after a while he said, well, writing it down, at least maybe some people will read it, benefit, learn lessons from this. So city after city was dropping down. Bukhara, Samarkand, Maru, Hura, Nisabur, and the leader is just running away, Muhammad ibn Khawarizm. Running away. But it's a long story. The whole story of the Mongolian is a big story, which time doesn't allow us to talk too much about it. But these Mongolians were so fierce and so brutal that not only were they at war with the Muslims, they also opened up a frontier with the Christians, the Crusades, who were based in Armenia, based in Georgia. These were Crusade land. And also they went and attacked further the Russian Empire, which was Christian, Orthodox, and they attacked them as well, and putting defeat to those people as well. The only time that they really sort of stopped, if you like, was when they were met with good resistance from the Bulgarians, who managed to put an end to their expansion and also caused them to retreat a little bit. But anyway, as you can see, year after year, and this is within a matter of short space of time, the Mongolians had covered so much territory, to the extent that some say that they covered one of the biggest empires in terms of land mass that the world has known. And all spilling blood, killing, destroying the houses, burning. They had no respect for anyone. Obviously, after a while, Genghis Khan wasn't going to live forever, and he died. He was succeeded by some other military leaders, and one of them was Minko or Mingso. And this guy, he appointed as one of his brothers a famous commander by the name of Hulaku. And Hulaku, again one of the brutal reads, his focus now was on, they've managed to put an end to the Khawarizm dynasty, even though there was some resistance, which time does not allow us to go into detail. They've managed to put down all the Christians in that area, the Russians, etc. Their focus now was on how to topple the Abbasid Khilafah. Okay? Now the Abbasid Khilafah was a weak Khilafah, as I mentioned before, but it still was a name. It was still a Khilafah. The Ayubids, as I mentioned before, they wanted approval from the Abbasid, at least that this is the title. Nobody else was saying we are the Khulafa. They might say we are Amir, we are Sultan, we are this, but then nobody was actually saying I'm the Khalifa. So the Abbasid Khilafah was still there. The capital was Baghdad. Baghdad was probably the largest city in the world at that time, with over 3 million inhabitants. Very well fortified. Built by Al-Mansoor, one of the first Abbasid Khilafah. It has a history of over 500 years. Okay, so when a city is like this, it's developed, it's civilized, etc., etc. But Hulaku knew that this is where he needs to attack. And so he started to prepare the armies, prepare the numbers, and to come to Iraq from the east. He had his another brother who was from the north come down. And what is also considered very sad and despicable was that some of the other Muslim emirs who were at odds with the Khilafah, they also rushed to support the Mongolians. From the Ayubids, emirs, the grandchildren and ancestors of Salah ad-Din, they were ready to put their hand with the Mongolians to put an end to topple the Abbasid dynasty. And so, in addition to the Armenians, the Christians, and the Kurd, who were from the Georgia, they all came to support the attack on Baghdad. And the siege was laid on Baghdad. And the ruler at the time, the Khalifa, was known as Al-Musta'sim. Al-Musta'sim was a pathetic ruler. He hadn't invested in his army. He had wasted time. Like most of the rulers at the time, his main concern was gathering wealth, taxing the people, etc. And on top of all that, he had his minister and prime minister was somebody called Al-Alqami, who, even though the Khalifa was a Sunni, his prime minister was someone from the Shia background. And this guy was not only this, but he was a traitor. He was secretly in discussion with the Mongolians, and he was helping them. And he was the guy who was telling the Khalifa to, just lower down the army, don't spend too much, don't worry about spending, etc. So the army gradually became weaker and weaker, to the extent that some of the historians say that even the army, the soldiers, were begging. They were not being paid money. They weren't, so how can I send the mentality? And this, coupled with the fact that the Muslims already heard about the stories before, the Mongolians' brutality, it became almost like amongst the folklore that the Mongolians were people who drank blood and they ate humans, and they were people who were never defeated, they've never lost. This kind of thing puts, psychological. Now Holako has sieged the Baghdad, and they are starting to catapult with their the stones and attacking. Al-Musta'sim doesn't know what to do. He's Al-Alqami, his advisor, is saying to him, maybe you should think about some sort of discussion with the Mongolians for a surrender. And so Al-Musta'sim not sure, what shall he do? The people, there's 3 million people, but all of them are still, they're baffled what to do. Should we resist? Shall we fight? Shall we, the army is weakened. He said, at the end, they find that when he sees that it's all being, he's being attacked, the stones, etc., he's surrounded, he feels that he has nothing to do except to surrender, or at least try to negotiate some sort of truce or like. So Holako accepts. He said, we can discuss, we can have a discussion, but you must come personally. And so the Khalifa says, okay, I have to, what can I do? No other thing. But not only that, you have to bring with you the top people in the city, all the top traders, top businessmen, your ministers, the ulama, all the people who are the influential in this side. Bring them all so that they can all witness the truce. So over 700 people come. They leave Baghdad. Holako is camping outside. They go to him. But then Holako says, when they want to enter on the Khilafah, he doesn't allow all them to. He said only 17 people to enter onto Holako. Yeah? The rest of them were all the top people, the ministers, the politicians, the ulama. They were all taken and executed. This is the beginning. And the Khalifa is shocked. Now he's there, And the Holako says basically now he is for putting the conditions. And the guy has nothing, he can't say anything. He has to accept. And he's wanting to secure some sort of peace for people, that people are going to be spared. And even though Holako was promising all this, in reality he had something else in mind. So then he doesn't kill the Khalifa, he brings him, allows the Khalifa to tell him where all his treasures are, all the wealth of the city are, All these businessmen were also to tell where the people are. And the Al-Alqami, this minister, also tells him, now he's shown as a traitor, tells him all the leading scholars as well who are in the city, people who might potentially call for jihad, and they are brought forth, they are executed, and etc. Now, that's it. There's no army, there's no protection, everybody's surrounded. The Khalifa is in the hands of so the Mongolians enter into Baghdad. And for the first time in history, the Khilafah is demolished. And Holako is in control. And what he promised them peace, he promised them safety. But then he announces that the city is, I don't even know what the English translator is, but it is basically, it's basically a halal, yani it's free for all the soldiers to do whatever they want. There is no restrictions. So the Mongolians then start to go and they just cause corruption in the whole of the city. Killing and butchering people, killing women, killing children, and do you know how many people they killed? The historians say at the least estimate is 800,000. But some say it as many as 1.2 million people were killed by the Tatars. They took their money, they burnt their houses. So much killing was there that even himself, Holako, was afraid that his own army would become ill from the stench of the dying corpses that were rotting and etc. So he asked all the other people who were hiding or whatever to come out. So he said, this is now a real truce. Come out so that you can bury those people. There's a stench and not only this, not only had he, killed everybody, and the Khalifa is watching, all his money is being taken. In addition to that, they go and commit another crime, which is to ransack the famous library in Baghdad, which contained hundreds of thousands of manuscripts of knowledge, all aspects of knowledge. As you know, when we talked about the Abbasid Khilafah, the Abbas had invested in knowledge, Dar al-Hikmah and etc. You can mention the ulama throughout the years. Baghdad was a center, it was the hub of knowledge. Even from the many ulama of hadith and fiqh, etc. It had knowledges of science as well, medicine, astronomy, translated sciences from the Greeks, from the Chinese, from the Indian, from Latin. There was all translated. There was a big movement. They ransacked the whole library and they took all the books and they threw them into the Tigris River, Dijla. No, they threw them into the river, such that the river, they say, changed into black from the ink, all the ink. Because remember, this is not like a printed book which is just gonna, this was ink, so you put it in water, khalas, the ink is all just gonna be washed away. So much so that some people said, there's a big river. They said that the books almost like formed a bridge. That's how much books were thrown away. You see the kind of, not just uncivilized, but you see how they hated humanity. And somebody who has any mind will say, this is all knowledge, take it back to your capital or whatever, benefit, build on it. But they just wanted to demolish, destruct, putting an end to 5 centuries of a civilization of knowledge, of growth. And this is all why the Khalifa is seeing this, to show him that he is the Khalifa of the Muslims. He didn't act as a Khalifa. He didn't protect them. He didn't prepare. What would he have lost if he had actually said, let us fight, let us protect, he lost everything. And then, to put an end to him as well, they didn't want to just chop his head off. They rolled him up in one of his carpets, and they let the horses trample over him, over the Khalifa. And that was the end of the Khalifa. In addition, obviously, to all his family being killed. So this was the Mongolian. They sacked, as they say in English, they sacked Baghdad. They ended the Khilafah in 656 after Hijrah. Okay? And after a few weeks, Holaka went back to his fort back in Tabriz, which is in the north of Iran, which is where he was based. And now he was thinking of how can he carry on with his expeditions. But as they say, when some of the people say that once you taste, or once you taste this kind of victory, there's no stop. You want more and more. You will never feel full. So what is in front of him now? In front of him is the land of Sham, Syria and Palestine and Jordan, and beyond that, Egypt. Okay, so that's where he's thinking of how to expand. I think time has run out because we've gone on. What we'll have to do is maybe finish off this session next time. And I hope inshallah next time we can have the PowerPoint, so at least you guys can see, because it's a lot of picturization of the maps is important to see how this the expansions happened. Also to view the kind of the kind of areas of conflict and what they were happening. But now the Mongolians have taken all this land. They're expanding. They've sacked the Khilafah, and in front of them is still remnants in Sham and Egypt, which is the gateway to the rest of Africa. And they want to carry on their expedition, so they're thinking, how are they gonna defeat the rest of the Muslims? And as we will see next week, next lesson in one month, that a lot of the Muslim emirs now, they are trembling. Okay, they are frightened. And so it is not strange that they are now rushing to the Mongolians to try and give them the allegiance and say, look, we are your subjects, we are your loyal subjects, we will, just to protect their thrones, so that they will not be dealt with in the same way that the Musta'sam was dealt with. And my dear respected brothers, obviously, unfortunately, and this is history, and sisters, brothers and sisters, that unfortunately there's many lessons in history. But it's unfortunate to see how when people become so entrenched in the dunya, they lose even the power to resist. A lot of Muslims at that time, especially imagine in Baghdad, they think this is it, this is the end, this is the Qiyam al-Sa'ah. Some people are saying the Mongolians are Ya'juj and Ma'juj. They're waiting for Al-Mahdi to come, for Jesus to come, Isa alayhi salam. People have that kind of apocalyptic kind of view that that's it. There is no way we can do anything now. And not only that, but when fear becomes so entrenched in them, it was said, and when you hear the stories of some of the historians, it's so despicable. You wouldn't imagine. They would say that one of these Mongolians, otherwise known as the Tatar, one of them would capture 50 Muslims, and he would have them all on a leash, and 50 and one being just pulled by one Tatar, and none of them would resist, and they're all taken to be executed. They're gonna die. There's nothing else. At least die in honor. Others, they say that even the women amongst the Mongols would come, and they would enter a house, and they would find that they don't have a sword with them, the Mongols, and then they will say to them, "Stay here, don't move. I'm just gonna go and get my sword to kill you." And these guys would stay. They would not even move, waiting for death to come to them. You see the kind of despicable reality that people reached when they have that kind of entrenched in the dunya. Further to this, do you see how some of the Muslim leaders were helping the Mongolians to attack Baghdad? See, because Allah mentions in the Quran, you see, He said, you will see those people who have illness in their hearts. They would rush to those people, rush to give them allegiance and help, because they are afraid that the tables will be turned on them. Alright, they have no honor, no nobility. And this is not strange, because even the Abbasid Khilafah is not like he was a noble guy. He was also at one point helping others to fight. I didn't mention it here because obviously time, but at one stage the Abbasid Khilafah, he actually wanted the Mongolians' help to attack another Muslim from Khawarizm. Do you see how things had been switched around? So this is all unfortunate lessons. And subhanAllah, when you read this history, and that's why I think Suhail wanted to put the title, The Golden History of Islam. And I said, no, it's not all golden. Let's just call it the history of Islam, because unfortunately, when you read these kind of stories, when you can read these, there are lots of lessons to be learned. And the lessons are repeated as well. You know, when you see the Muslims today, you see the situation today, it's not far off. And in many ways, it's actually better now. Things are much better. Imagine this kind of annihilation, this genocide that was happening. The whole city is completely executed, and the houses are burnt, and etc. from these savages. So inshallah, next lesson we will have part 2 of this considerable, because at the one side. Sorry? So this started at the beginning of the 7th century of Hijrah, so about 600 and something. They sacked Baghdad in 656. So within about 50 to less than 60 years, they ended and they controlled most of the Asia, and extending right up to Russia and the likes. And then they were to come into conflict very soon with the Mamalik, which is what we were going to talk about, but time does not have. And then after this conflict with the Mamalik, which is about 2-3 years later, that's when they started to go on the demise. But they didn't just fall altogether. They went on the demise by breaking up. They became factions. So much like what the Muslims happened, they had one Mongolian empire, a series of their leaders died, and they started to argue amongst themselves. And so different sets of Mongolian factions developed, and gradually, I mean, some of the Mongolians even became Muslims. The Mongols became Muslims, and they started to fight each other. So within about another sort of less than 150 years, the Mongolians as a strength ended. But it was replaced by other dynasties, as we inshallah will find out later on. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you very much for that. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to benefit us. These are not just stories to be told, but these are lessons to be learnt, inshallah, and we hope that we can learn from these lessons so that we can benefit ourselves and others, inshallah ta'ala. Subhanakallah wa hamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa astaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Next Friday is the 7:30, yeah? Inshallah, bidnillah ta'ala. I translated it. It's actually compiled by Imam Nawawi.